Well, good afternoon everyone, and thank you George for introducing me. I hope I live up to your expectations, but that's good. Well, welcome everyone. We did have 21 people signed up, and we've got 9 who have joined us this afternoon, but that's grand. I hope the people that did sign up but couldn't join us for whatever reason will be able to listen to the recording. So I'm Gary Cameron, and I've introduced this series of Power Up Your Theory sessions, and I'm starting with the craft of asking questions. The reason mainly why is I do think that how you frame your questions is probably one of the most powerful ways of getting your students active, getting them engaged, giving them feedback, being a good differentiator. So I'm a great fan of the power of questioning. And I think there are sort of 5 main strategies for reframing and framing questions. And I hope that you will find something new, or if not new, that it will just reassure you. So why this webinar? I think it's really because there have been a number of Education Scotland reviews, and there's quite a lot of information comes out of these reviews, but I was particularly interested in one of the latest reviews, which, well, I'll not name the college, but it got a very, very good Education Scotland review, but there's always a but, and it said, the college should ensure teaching approaches, particularly during theory lessons, are motivating and stimulating for all learners, and that sometimes asking questions are more important than answers. And I think I do agree with that second bullet point. I think I started in education decades ago where I was more of an interrogator, and when I didn't get the answer that I wanted, I tended to crack first and give them the answer or get really cross. But over the years I've mellowed, and rather being an interrogator that cracks first, I'm now more of a mentor who coaxes out the answers. And the only way that a mentor can coax out the answers is by powerful questioning techniques. The greatest compliment I ever had from one of my college students was when this young man said to me, "Gary, you don't actually tell me anything or tell us anything, do you?" And I said, that is just the best compliment ever, because the questioning techniques that I used really was the coaching bit of it, and I really was a mentor who coaxed out the answers. But sometimes when there are bits of the curriculum to teach, I do have to use, I suppose, simple procedural questions, and I absolutely get that. But it really was a huge compliment to me when that young man said that. So, is there anything new and innovative around questioning, or anything in the Education Scotland reviews that have come up? No, time and time again. 2006, the college that I worked in, we had a review, and it was about learning and teaching approaches and how they can foster and maintain interest. Most teaching staff take appropriate account of learners' prior learning and experience, and how I do that is through questioning techniques. That's the way you do it when you work with your students, when you are trying to ascertain their prior learning, their skills, the knowledge that they have. 2014, again, sufficiently wide range of teaching approaches to promote effective learning. There are only 5 main ones, which I've done in webinars before, so I'll not rehearse those. And then in 2016, the one that I had on the previous slide, the college should ensure teaching approaches, particularly during theory lessons, are motivating and engaging. And for me, the easiest way to do that is through the quality of your questioning techniques. So I'm going to start with some questions, and I'm going to ask you to join in and answer a question for me, and hopefully it will come across, or George will drag it across for me. The first question, George. There we go. Yeah, how many questions have you asked today? So if you'd just like to click on loads, relatively few, none, then we'll see how we go. That's interesting. I'm glad to see that there have been nobody's clicked the none box, so that's fine. But yeah, loads and relatively few. Thanks, George. If you could pull across poll 2, that would be great. So, how much time do you think is devoted to questioning during a teaching session when you're working with your students? It could be 2 hours, it could be 3 hours. Yeah. Any more there? Yeah, well, the theorists tell me that it's usually up to a third of teaching time that is taken up with asking questions. So a third of your teaching time, we've got to get the questions right, I would suggest. So that was really interesting. Thank you very much. And the final one, George? So how many questions do you think lecturers ask over the course of a career? Now that could be 20, it could be 30 years. Any suggestions? Yeah, I'm glad that some people have haven't a clue, because before I got into reading some of the stuff around questioning, I didn't have a clue either. But apparently, and I suppose that includes me as a lecturer or teacher, about 2 to 3 million questions over your teaching career. That's a heck of a lot of questions. So as I said back at the beginning, we need to get the questions right. So that was just a wee bit of engagement, and I suppose getting you active by actually doing something. So I'll just ask to bring me back to the presentation now. Thanks, George. Okay, I need to tell you stuff now, rather than just telling you that why we should ask good questions. I think for me, when you look at the professional standards around facilitating learning and teaching, I think good questioning does all these things on the slide. Active learning and engagement. Students don't have to be busy doing stuff all the time. Active learning engagement can be delivered through good, solid questioning techniques, and that can be from very low-level questions, recall, procedural questions, to questions that are quite high order and demand prediction and inference skills. Quite often we're asked, how do you differentiate when you're working with your learners, whether in the college classroom, the theory classroom, or indeed in the vocational workshop? Questions to me are the most obvious differentiator, because we differentiate our questions all the time based on our knowledge of the students, the level and pace of the session, and if we have to go back, reinforce, rehearse, consolidate any information. So for me, good questions deliver a real differentiation approach, and when people ask me, how do you differentiate, probably top of my list is differentiation. It's up there with the level of support that I give to students. Good questions can give you challenge and enjoyment, and I think for me, I know I've cracked it with my questioning technique when, after a few weeks of working hard with groups, you'll get a student who will ask a really sensible question. And I always used to have a big banner up in my theory classroom: the best learners ask the best questions, and I really do believe that. Good questioning techniques helps deepen the knowledge and understanding. It clears up student misconceptions as well, because based on the answers to your questions, you're very clear about what you have to reinforce and consolidate. And the other bullet point 5 there, when we look at our professional standards, there are two things that stand out. We are supposed to be promoting interdependent learners. We are supposed to be promoting students who think, who can critically evaluate, and who can reflect. Well, the most obvious way of that is the framing of your questions, and you can go through a whole hierarchy of questions, as I say, from simple recall and procedural all the way up to the high order skills of prediction, inference, synthesis and evaluation. And then the final one there, yes, it is about coaxing out the answers. So look at the power of questioning then. It does all these things, and it can certainly power up your theory sessions. Of course, the questions have to be set within the constraints of the curriculum, but I do think good questioning techniques and how we frame up our questions delivers all of those things and can certainly power up our theory questionings. Good questioning is feedback. At the end of the session, I've included a link in the closing screen where there's a fantastic publication called Vocational Pedagogy, How to Teach Vocational Education. And if you've got time or you're interested or you're doing teaching qualifications, whether it's the PDA Level 9 or indeed the TQFE or the certificate in HE, then I've signposted you to about half a dozen pages of this fantastic publication, which really does detail what questioning can do for you, particularly in your theory sessions. And I think I've said in the previous slides, good questions clarify, they elaborate, they promote reflection, critical thinking, and of course, really good feedback. Feedback's another powerful tool that moves learning forward. We all need feedback, and the quality of the questioning gets us that feedback on what we have to revisit, and also what the students have understood. So for me, good questioning, is a part of that whole feedback process. And I suppose if we were to take it one step further, it would be the feed forward, because we very quickly know from our good questioning techniques not only the feedback that we need to give, but also how do we plan the next steps for our own learning and teaching approaches, but also for the students as well. Right, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to ask you a question, and if you would just use the chat box there, I shouldn't bore you with loads and loads of information. So I'm going to ask you a question this afternoon, and just based on some of the stuff that Gary has said this afternoon, what's the most interesting thing I've said, if anything, about questioning techniques? So what's the most interesting thing that I have said about questioning techniques? I'm going to take a minute out so you can develop your reflection and your critical thinking, but also so that I can coax some answers out of you. So please feel free to answer that question in the chat box. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Sarah and Susan. Yeah, that was quite a surprise to me. 2 to 3 million questions during your career. Yeah, and for me it was, well, I better start asking better questions then. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, good that you found that interesting. Yeah, Audrey, reflection and thinking for themselves. Thanks, Archie. Yeah, that's good that you're getting that as well. So you're definitely the mentor who coaxes out the answers there. Yes, thanks, Michael. Oh, Sharon, you've made my day. Thank you very much for that comment. Yeah, we're on the same page with questioning. Thanks very much for that. So even in a webinar, you can do a wee bit of active learning and participation. So thanks for all your feedback there. That's really good. Okay, moving on then. I think I would just like to, despite all the stuff that we've talked about, everything that questionings can do, I think there's a ruthless simplicity in questioning. And I suppose if you were to take it to its lowest level, we ask a range of lower order questions, which is basically remember, recall, and procedural, and higher order questions that require thinking. First time I was ever part of a review process, the reviewer said to me, yes, Gary, that was absolutely fine, but your questions were quite low level and kind of focused on recall, and you were actually asking them questions that you had a clear idea of what answer you wanted back. And I think they were absolutely right, and that was because I was quite a new lecturer at that time, and as I say, I was more anxious about being the interrogator and cracking first because I was so desperate to get the right answer. And very quickly learned that when you ask good questions, you actually have to give them thinking time. All the stuff around the waiting time that we know, particularly by some people who have researched the waiting time there, you need to give people time to think and respond to your questions. And as a young, naive lecturer, I often got that wrong because I often felt I had to get the answer right away. And then finally, within the constraints of the curriculum, the best learners ask the best questions. And I think some of my students were absolutely tired of hearing me saying that. One thing that I did come across when I was working around questioning techniques was something that was new to me, and these were thunks. And thunks, you might think, are just a gimmick, but I'm going to try and get you thunking. And this is the work of a chap called, I've forgotten his name now. Gilbert, I beg your pardon, Ian Gilbert. And Ian Gilbert tried in 2014 to get the nation thinking about deep philosophical questions by asking questions that you might think are gimmicky, or another way of looking at things in the world. And he refers to them as thunks. And in 2014, he got some really good chat going through the BBC website where he asked a lot of Socratic questions. People who are thinking about really quite deep philosophical things, but in a very easy, approachable way. And I suppose thunks are a way of quickly and easily getting people thinking and talking. It's a possible warm activity for students of all ages, and I think it's quite an enjoyable questioning activity. The best thunk Ian Gilbert asked was, is the hokey cokey what it's all about? And this question went hugely viral. And we got some fantastic stuff back, and we had one reply which I think was the best. There should have been a prize for that. Response was, well, if it's not, then it certainly should be. So I'm going to ask you a thunk here. So here's a gimmicky question, or it might be a question that gets you looking at differently at things. So I'm going to butt out for a minute again, and here's a thunk for you. Is saying I don't know better than guessing? So I'm going to step out for a minute, give you thinking time, reflecting time, and evaluation time, and put your responses in the chat box, please. Thank you. I'm really loving your answers this afternoon. Yes, concise and to the point. Thanks, Audrey. Yeah, I like when people give things a bash. I suppose I don't know is an answer. Yeah, at least they've contributed. I suppose we've got them engaged in some way. Yes, thank you, Cheryl. That's a nice comment there. Yeah, good point from Michael there. Yes, you can you can actually use even a I don't know contribution. You can even snowball the question and say to right, Michael, can you help Cheryl out, or is there anything Archie you think you could contribute to that question? So yeah, that's nice as well. Okay, so if you didn't know about thunks, you heard it here for the first time, but I quite like getting people thunking. Okay, when I was looking at this, I reckon there are only 5 main questioning strategies, and I did say in the webinar descriptor that I would highlight what I think are the 5 best questioning strategies, but I'd like to put a kind of health warning on this. These are the strategies I use with my groups of students or learners, whatever age they are. Once I've actually done some input, I've actually done some teaching content, because if you try to ask some of these strategies, you would probably get the very reluctant learners, and your learners, we all know our learners, we have to build up that relationship to give them the confidence to actually contribute. And that's why I think it's so fantastic that even after weeks, when one student actually asks a relevant and appropriate question, you've certainly made a breakthrough. But I would suggest, and you will have a different viewpoint, but there are 5 good strategies for asking questions, and I've just put them up there. Giving a range of answers. So what I like to do is maybe to give a question with a range of answers and ask the students to think about how they might have arrived at each of those answers. So give a reason why an answer might be plausible, as well as identifying the correct answer. Turning the question into a statement for students to agree or disagree with, giving reasons. And I'm actually going to share one with you for you to contribute and having a look at. Finding opposites, or one that works and one that does not, and asking for reasons. I think my favourite one is I like to bring in a couple of circuit boards and get them to have a discussion about why one circuit board doesn't work and why another one does. Giving the solution and asking how it was arrived at. So actually giving an answer and asking them to discuss and evaluate, sometimes in groups or in pairs, how it was arrived at. And then asking a question from an opposing standpoint to get the discussion. And I particularly like to do that when we're talking about some big high-level ethical issues. And quite often, I really like using statement cards as a way of getting their questioning going, where I print a range of statements and I ask in groups or in pairs or even individuals whether they agree, disagree, or they're not sure. So they are probably the 5 main questioning techniques, and I'm going to try one now on you. And I apologise if you've seen neither of these programmes, and you do not have to contribute to this, but this is giving the solution and getting people to think about. So if you haven't watched the Bake Off or you haven't watched The Apprentice, I do apologise. If you have, you can contribute, but will not labour the point. And the question is, the Great British Bake Off tells us more about learning than just about any other programme on TV. Do you agree or disagree? Give the reasons why. So you're actually giving them a solution and asking them, well, how might you arrive at that answer? So I'm just going to step out for a couple of moments, and if you want to have a go at answering that question, do so. If not, I'll quickly move on. But if you would like to indulge me, that would be fantastic, just for a minute or two. Great response, Audrey. Fantastic. You're thunking this afternoon. Brilliant. Susan, from Fife College, yeah. Constructive feedback, yeah. It's a period of weeks, yeah. Thank you. Yep. Ian. Problem solving and being creative. Thanks, Michael. Excellent. Yeah. As both are entertaining. Yeah, that's great, Archie. Right, thank you. I'd just like to thank you for contributing to a wee bit of nonsense there about questioning techniques, but I think I've put a list there, yeah, and I sort of said, well, really? And I think the chat box just picks up all the things that you've already said, and yeah. I mean, I'm not going to talk through that. I think it's all there. You've already mentioned the feedback and the skill transference and the facilitation, because you've got facilitators there as well. So I suppose that could be a thunk, or it could be a really high order questioning technique, one of the 5 strategies that I referred to. So thank you for that. Okay, I think that's me. What are your thoughts about questioning now? In the chat box, identify one thing you found interesting in the webinar content. I've raced through this, but I think we've been going for about half an hour, so that's just absolutely perfect. In fact, it's 29 minutes, and I said I would be 30 minutes, so that's excellent. But yeah, in the chat box, any one thing you found interesting in the webinar content. So one final question then. I'm hoping you can see me on the webcam, but you can also see my picture there in the middle. So I'm just going to ask a question. Do I look like my picture in real life? You can be as rude as you like. Ah, a pity that I thought I had shared my webcam with you, but Sarah says yes. Oh, what a star, Archie. Much nicer in real life. Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. You've met me in real life. Well, I hope it wasn't too painful for you. Okay, that's great. If there's anything you would like to add, I'll hang around for 5 minutes. Thanks, Ian. I shall have to pass these on to my line manager and see if they agree or disagree. You've made me smile this afternoon. Brilliant.